Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, we've been working on this page from Hanna Karlzon's Tales from the Witch's Cottage. We're not done with the cat, but we're setting him aside for now to work more on the girl. So I'm going to start today by choosing some skin colors. Skin can be really intimidating, but a page like this is a great way to start experimenting with it since the shapes to color in are fairly small. The way I color pale skin is fairly simple. I use a light purple or blue, a peachy midtone, a slightly browner or ruddier secondary midtone, sometimes a cream, and white. I wasn't sure which midtones I wanted to use on this page, so I experimented on a separate sheet of paper. The colors I ended up picking for the skin today are Greyed Lavender, Light Peach, Seashell Pink, Caribbean Sea, Blush Pink for the cheeks, and Nectar. The first thing I'm going to do is go in with the Greyed Lavender. I'm coloring lightly in the shadowiest part of the skin. Because the light is coming from the right of the girl, the darkest spots are going to be to the left and anywhere where the light is blocked. So her neck and ear area on the face will get the most lavender. And I'll continue bringing that down around the chin, around the hairline, under her brow, and just on the side of her nose. If you like full face makeup, you can think about these as areas you would add contour. The left of her hand will be the darkest, so I start there and then lighten pressure as I go toward the fingers. I leave a rim on the bottom to create that backlight effect. Her legs are in the most shadow, so I fill them almost entirely with a light layer of lavender, but still a little more pressure on the left side of each leg, lightening toward the right. Next, I'm going in with Light Peach. This is the overall skin tone color. I'm going to blend it into the Greyed Lavender we've already put down and extend it farther onto the face, hand, and legs. I then go over all the lavender shadowed areas with Seashell Pink. This gives a little more flesh colored to the shadows. Almost no light is reaching the legs, so I use Caribbean Sea to emphasize the shadows there. I then add just a touch to the wrist and finger. And then I add a little bit to the neck area. I then soften the edges by going over it with just a bit of Greyed Lavender again. To finalize all that blending, I go over everything with the Light Peach again. Next, I use Blush Pink to add some color to her cheeks. This is just soft, really light circle motions on her cheekbone area. I'm going to darken it up a bit with the Nectar and add Nectar to the lips as well. I go over the cheeks with Light Peach again to blend it together, and then take some time just adding a little more Light Peach in areas I think could use a little more color. At this point, I'm finished with the skin, so I'm going to use a white pencil to burnish. Burnishing is when you push hard on the paper with a pencil to blend pigments together. You can see an example of that here. The process also flattens the tooth of the paper, meaning it's much more difficult to add layers on top of the burnished areas. You can burnish with a blender pencil, but for pale skin, I prefer to burnish with white. The white will desaturate the color on the page and create a milky effect. As you burnish, make sure to start in the lighter areas and move toward the shadows. Pushing hard with the pencil physically moves the pigment around, and you want to avoid pulling those blues and purples out into the peach areas. I stop and rub the nib of my pencil frequently to make sure it's clean before going into a new section. The skin is now just slightly more desaturated than I want, so I go back and forth adding Nectar and blending it again with white. On the legs, I add just a touch of Caribbean Sea again. Next up is her boots. I'm going in with Light Umber, Burnt Ochre, Chocolate, Cream, Terra Cotta, and Henna. I start with Light Umber and color this the same way I colored the skin, starting on the left of each boot in the shadowed area and lightening pressure as I extend towards the right. I want the boots to be slightly ruddier in color, so I add Burnt Ochre, going over the Raw Umber slightly and extending out more. I add Chocolate over the darker areas, and then I will go over with the Burnt Ochre again to blend. I use cream to go over the areas where there's still white showing through, and then I go over the whole boot to blend. This brown still isn't warm enough for me, so I add more Burnt Ochre. Then I add final shadows with Chocolate, making sure to go over the top rim of the boots as well. This part is tricky, but I do my best to add a dot of henna on the left side of each lace. Then I go over the laces with cream. That is it for the boots, and we're moving on to hair. For the hair, I'm switching to Polychromos pencils because they keep a finer point. The colors I'm using are Caput Mortuum, India Red, Light Yellow Ochre, Walnut Brown, Caput Mortuum Violet, Light Flesh, and Black. I think of coloring hair the same way we colored the ribbons in the clothing video. I imagine the hair curving toward and away from me, and color in the spaces where they curve away. The spaces where they curve toward us we'll leave for highlights. I'm also coloring the ends of hair that look like they're tucking into other locks. I'm also thinking about the overall lighting of the hair as a whole, so I'm adding more color to the bottom and left areas of her head than the top and right. Next, I go in with India Red to extend those shaded areas and add some new ones. With light yellow ochre, I'm mostly adding this to the top and right sections of her hair, fading it out toward the bottom left. I add it where I think the light would probably hit the harshest. I do also add it to the 3 bits of hair hanging down. They are bottom left, but those pieces are small and thin and would get caught by the backlight. Then I add Walnut Brown to darken some of the shadows and overall hair color. I go back in with India Red to make sure the auburn quality is still coming through. I add just a little more Caput Mortuum to blend everything that I have so far. We've lost a bit of contrast, so I go over the shadows again with a little bit of Walnut Brown, paying special attention to the bottom left of her head. I add a little Caput Mortuum violet to help blend those shadows while still keeping them dark. Then I use light flesh to very lightly blend the more highlighted areas. I avoid using black where possible, but for this hair I just can't get the shadows dark enough without it. I'm very careful about adding black, using only the very tip of the pencil in the very darkest corners of the hair and only on the bottom and left sides of her head. I go over a couple spots again with India Red to make sure again that her hair is pulling red enough. That's it for the hair, so we're just going to do the earring real quick. For the earring, I'll start by adding Raw Umber to the bottom of the hoop and right next to her earlobe. I use Naples Yellow to go over and extend those two spots toward each other, and then go over those two spots with Dark Sepia. I don't worry about blending this, as light reflections on jewelry are harsh and not soft. And that is it. Please give this video a thumbs up if you liked this tutorial. Be sure to subscribe if you want to see more like it in the future. See you next time.